I think it started with me trying to learn how to become a more effective leader earlier in my career as a CEO. So I've been a CEO for 20 plus years. I had a lot of answers, and I did not lead in a way that would get people to want to do things early in my career.
Good morning, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. Today, I'm extremely excited to have James Lawrence, a distinguished leader with a wealth of experience across many different industries, from tech to just human leadership. He is the founder and CEO of Happy Companies, a pioneering organization dedicated to transforming the workplace culture and enhancing employee well-being. Nothing more important than that, James. So I'm really excited to have you here. You and I had a great conversation, I think, about a month ago, and I was picking your brain about the product. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Tell us your journey up to this point, James. How did you get started in this world? Not necessarily about happiest companies, but just your journey up here. You have a very impressive background in leadership in different industries. What are some key experiences that shaped your leadership philosophy and got you to this point?
Yeah, I think I've always loved building things. So even from being an young entrepreneur, 16, 17 years old, I've always been a builder. And I've just always been fascinated with kind of the combination of art and science of creating things. So it's interesting because my parents were both psychologists. And so I came from a background of academics. And I remember at the age of 20, I dropped out of UCLA to start my first company. And I remember going home and telling mom and dad about that. And I don't put that on the bucket list of things I would recommend to do.
How did they react?
Telling your PhD parents that you're about to drop out of college is probably not what your mom was looking for a nice Friday night dinner conversation. But
yes,
but we got through it.
Nice. How did that work out for you, James?
I think everybody takes their own path. And I think it's just really important that we recognize that there's just not one way, right? Like the definition of success. When you're 20 years old, dropping out of college for me, didn't really impact my professional success. I would say my social game wasn't as good leaving college, but it hasn't impacted me that much professionally. So I think people should chase their heart. I mean, it's a little different. So I was in school, this was 1996. I'm 48. I think today there's more, it's more common to take, different paths. I mean, I think, when I was in school, my parents' expectations were that I was going to go get a 4-year degree and, maybe go to graduate school. And I think, luckily it's a little more acceptable to take different paths now. So
sure. What, you came from a technical background, James, or did you start as a non-technical entrepreneur?
It's interesting. I'm going to flag the word tech. I have been an entrepreneur and have done software for a long time and a whole bunch of other things. But I'm an engineer. I'm a non-engineering founder. I've always been that way.
Same here.
But I started developing a video sharing application pre-YouTube. And so one of my first forays into tech was building a video sharing technology. And so that was quite entertaining because today, of course, with modern methodologies and engineering frameworks, you're not having to build every tiny little detail out. And so things like encoding video that are largely solved problems today were not terribly solved 20 years ago. So that was really one of my first kind of tech forays, was building that company. And so that was, ultimately I learned a lot about building software and ways to do it, ways not to do it. And so it was a fascinating journey that better prepared me for today. But I've done event production. I've owned event production companies. I owned a live streaming business. I owned a video production business, an advertising agency, a media company. I actually think that diversity has really helped me, especially with Happy today. But you can get into a bubble in the tech world and just kind of live in this little bubble. And, I don't know that great leadership comes from just living out of that bubble. I think being able to run different kinds of businesses and lead different kinds of people is really valuable.
I mean, people overthink the type of business you're in, right? If you've ever been in a YP or a Vistage group or any kind of think tank, you realize you're surrounded by a guy that runs a plumbing company. You can learn so much from that individual because people are people, right? A lot of the challenges are challenges, right? The PNL, borrowing money, scaling the business, retention, hiring, all that stuff is the same across the board. Let's jump to Happy Companies, right? Where did that come from, and what's the mission and vision behind this company?
Yeah, that's a fun one. I think it started with me trying to learn how to become a more effective leader earlier in my career as a CEO. So I've been a CEO for 20 plus years. I had a lot of answers, and I did not lead in a way that would get people to want to do things early in my career. And, I think just the desire to become a better leader, a better people leader. And frankly, I think also just what I like to call your organizational culture. Like, I was struggling to get the kind of organizational culture that I wanted to develop. And so I went and found a leadership coach, an executive coach that really transformed my own leadership. But I started realizing like the process of doing that at scale was really hard.
What was the key insights? Like, what changed, right? What were you looking back, what were you doing wrong, and what adjustments did you make with let's say this leader and on your own that kind of inspired you to want to do this at scale?
Well, I mean, most executive coaching is one-on-one. And I would start with kind of like this interesting thought, which is, you asked me what I learned. And, frankly, a lot of it was learning how to work with people. And communication and collaboration are really important in any manager direct report relationship. And frankly, I wasn't a very good listener, and I was often reactive. And that was probably the biggest thing, was learning how not to react to something, but how to respond to something. I wouldn't say it was always agreeing with somebody. And I can still, even to this day, I can be pretty prickly. Like, if I believe in something, or there's an underperformance issue, or if we're not getting the outcomes that we need to, like, I can be a pain in the ass. But I think listening to my team, that was really like the missing part of the equation. So really learning how to be a better listener. And our executive coach at the time was a gentleman by the name of John Delmatoff. And John really taught me how to read people. And then he broke the golden rule. So you're familiar with the golden rule?
No, tell me more.
Yeah. So the golden rule says, do unto others as they do unto you.
Sure.
That is really, for a leader, bad advice. This idea that you're going to treat people the way they want to be treated is much more important than treating people the way they treat you. Everybody really needs something different from you, and everybody can't be treated the same. And so, one of the things for me was recognizing that if I was working with someone that, for example, was somebody that wanted to take some time to make an important decision, I needed to learn how to give them some space and time to evaluate a big decision. Or say somebody that needed to use data and statistics, or they wanted to do adequate research before making a decision. I tend to be somebody that operates more on gut instinct. So for me, I figured, well, I'm going to treat others the way I want to be treated. Well, I'm not a data person, so I can't treat them the way I want to be treated. I need to treat them differently. And so I think my biggest takeaway was just learning the people that were in my team and really trying to respect them and the way they processed things, the way they made decisions, the way they communicated. And I wouldn't even say meet them in the middle. I would say trying to meet them where they were. And so for me as a leader, the better listening combined with trying to learn who they were provided huge advantages to me in terms of getting people to want to follow me and wanting to buy into my mission. But it was really hard at scale. And what I mean by scale is, my relationship with John was great, but I had a really hard time. I wanted to take that same magic that John gave me, and I wanted to distill it to our whole company, say 100 people. And, that's hard to take a one-on-one coaching relationship, and then you go, okay, how do I now take 100 people and improve their leadership? And so that's what Happy was born from, is this idea of how do we do this at scale? How do we take the great type level of coaching that I got and the great insights that I got that were personalized and contextualized to me, but how do I do that at scale for an entire company?
Nice. And what is, I mean, there's obviously a secret sauce that you came up with. I'm guessing your parents' PhD mindset probably helped with this situation, right? It's in psychology.
Yeah, we joked a little bit. I'm a little bit of I don't know the words unicorn, but I'm a little unusual. So yeah, I have two parents that are, were PhD psychologists and then had a tech background and really liked leadership. And so it was kind of a fun combination of things to apply at Happy because, I think the traditional playbook of like, how do you use tech and software to make teams work better together? And the traditional solution to this, there's been like two traditional solutions. One is one-on-one coaching, which is great. I mean, one-on-one coaching is the gold standard. And a great coach, a great leadership coach, like that's not easy to beat combo. A great leadership coach can meet with you every week, can learn your situation, can learn you, help build a development plan for you. That's beautiful. There are no companies that I know of, and I would put FANG companies in there like Facebook, Apple, Netflix. Nobody is paying for executive coaches for every single employee in their company. Impossible. And especially not new leaders, new managers. The new manager, if depending on how much training they get, and often the new manager gets very minimal to no training, even at a top tech company. How does the new manager navigate building a team?
And finding great leadership or management courses is not easy, because I had a very good in the trenches kind of almost an architect who I wanted him to be a director, and he struggled with some of the people parts. I could not find a great course that I can truly feel like it would make an impact. So I actually agree with you. Tell us what does the platform actually do? Because that's very important. I mean, when I saw it, it rang a bell of, wow, this makes sense now. Of sure, I'd love to know everybody, but people present what they want you to know. As a leader, you don't always get to know your staff, especially if you have a large staff, well, especially if you have a lot of direct reports. And some of those things take years. And you've missed out on 2, 3, 4 years of great leadership because it took you so long to learn someone, to remove the barriers, to build the trust, and all those things take way too much time instead of you being effective day one. Tell us a little bit about like what is the assessment process? How do you determine what I'm about and how you can communicate with me?
Yeah, so Happy uses behavioral science. You kind of already nailed that, to learn how people work and communicate. And then we provide coaching through the tools that employees use every day. So Slack, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Gmail or email. And so it's a continuous learning model, but essentially because Happy understands everybody in the team, it's able to render personalized, contextualized coaching to each person. And so the way virtually every assessment works. So for example, let's say you took, pick your assessment, any of 10 assessments, virtually guaranteed you're going to end up with a 40-page PDF at the end of that.
Yes.
And that PDF is going to be packed with information. It might be really useful. I mean, to be frank, a lot of assessments use quite competent science, and you might get a couple of aha moments, and that might be valuable for you. But I guarantee you 3 months to 6 months down the road, there's a pile of paperwork. If you got it printed, it's sitting in the bottom of your file cabinet. If you got it on your computer, it's sitting in some email folder that you saved, and it isn't front and center for you. And the organizations we work with, the leading organizations, they'll tell you that they believe in assessments, but my question is, what value are they getting 3 to 6 months down the road? And so the difference with Happy is we're taking that same data that we learn about you and we learn about your coworkers, and we're applying it every single day in coaching, and it's contextualized and personalized. And what that means is, like, give me the name of someone you work with, like any name, anybody. Jeff. Okay. So if you and I were working with Jeff, and you got a piece of coaching from Happy. Let's say you guys use Slack and you got a piece of coaching on, you came out tomorrow, you got a piece of coaching from Happy and it said how to pitch Jeff an idea. And it might say, hey, based on, you and Jeff's styles, and you wanted to pitch Jeff an idea, here's the 3 things you would need to know to pitch him an idea. And let's say I woke up in the morning and I had a meeting with Jeff too. And Happy also sent me a piece of advice on 3 things that I need to do to pitch Jeff an idea. It's going to actually give me different coaching that it's going to give you, because you and I are different and Happy knows your and I's styles. So the coaching is personalized and contextualized to each of us.
Sure. That's very smart. So if you're an incredible writer and I'm not, it's going to recommend different ways to approach this individual, because I want to shoot from the hip. I'm very visual. I'm very verbal, right? So I just want to tell them my idea, while the other person is a great writer, will create a wonderful pitch deck, things like that. Is that kind of how you would summarize that?
You're close.
Okay.
So the one thing I would say is that our behavioral science isn't a great or not great. It's not a, you're good at this and you're not good at this. It shows what's your natural tendency.
Sure.
So let's maybe I would rephrase that from like good at writing and not good at writing to maybe something like this. Like, you might be a big picture thinker and Jeff might be into details and data. And so the way that I would pitch you an idea, if I was going to pitch you, I would probably dream with you for a bit. I'd say, hey, let's talk big picture. Let's talk vision. Let's build a vision board. Let's talk a year or 2 down the road. Let's talk about what kind of impact that we'd have in our business. And you and I might have a great opportunity to talk as a big picture thinker. But let's say Jeff was your boss and you were pitching Jeff an idea, and Jeff is a data analyst. You'd go into Jeff's office with all your big picture ideas and all your thoughts and all your vision. And the first thing Jeff would say to you is, how are you going to get any of this done? Show me some research. Where is the data backing this up? You said that people aren't doing X, Y, Z. How do I know that's even true? Do you have a study on that? And so you walk out of his office, like with your poo-poo face on, going like, Jeff didn't like my idea. And the truth is that, that isn't actually true. It's that Jeff uses data to make decisions and to evaluate ideas.
Sure.
And you use gut instinct and vision. And just from the time I've spent with you, you probably are a visionary. You probably are quite comfortable in that. Now, the problem with that is that if you surround yourself with people that are detail-oriented and very interested in data, I'm sure you have a senior leadership team meeting where you're talking about, your 5-year vision, and everybody's standing around you going, well, that's great, but how are we going to do X? How are we going to do all this stuff? And then you go, I can't be bothered by all these little details. I'm up here in the clouds.
Figure it out.
Yeah, we got this. But yeah. I mean, I'm just using I'm giving a pretty thin example of like how different people communicate and how they work together. But another good one to talk about is like, how do people resolve a conflict? So I usually, when I like to talk about this and how Happy solves these problems at scale, I actually like to talk anybody that's been in a relationship, spouse, man, woman, doesn't matter, realizes like you and your spouse, girlfriend, significant other are probably not the same exact person. And you can think, okay, when I get in a fight with my wife, I want to talk about it. And my wife gives me the silent treatment and walks away and goes, sits in a room and goes and reads for a while, right? Like we don't resolve problems the same way. And so what we call that is something really healthy in business, right? You can't build a great company without conflict. Conflict's actually very healthy.
Absolutely.
So a lot of people are taught like, well, they're conflict avoidant. Like, I don't want to get into a disagreement at work. But the reality is that there's a lot of different ways to do things. And we need to be able to talk about this in a healthy way. And so from a technology standpoint, Happy understands that maybe how you resolve a conflict is different than how I might sort through a conflict. And so like the tech behind understanding how we navigate that relationship creates really significant productivity improvements. Because I'll tell you, most new managers especially, especially younger managers or first-time managers, they're lacking a little life experience and a little professional experience, but they might have 3 or 4 or 5 people underneath them. And so learning how to navigate through that is really important.
Well, also, James, they might be managing folks across 5 different generations, and each one of those generations communicate differently. I mean, I don't know if I told you on our call or not, but I've got folks in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s in this organization. So one person doesn't check their emails, right? The other person only communicates via emails. One person's sensitive, one person's hardcore, and so understanding their different styles, I could see how incredibly valuable that could be, especially if it's fed to me in a really easy to read summary. I'm guessing what it looks like. How is it learning these things, James? Is AI learning through my communication and my Slack, my Teams, my emails? How is it understanding how I communicate, and how quickly does it figure it out?
So some of that's proprietary, but one of the things I can tell you is the secret sauce behind this is less complicated than you would think.
Right.
Because humans fall into relatively predictable patterns. And so it's not that everybody's not unique, because everybody is one of one. Like we each are uniquely, ourselves with our own mix of experience and skills and backgrounds. But that being said, humans fall into relatively like consistent behavioral patterns. And so that part of the science is easier than you might think. The secret science isn't really this understanding you. Because understanding you and kind of understanding how you process information and how you tend to make decisions. And, I would say like within we've got say 90 to 93% accuracy, somewhere around there. So, 19 out of 20 people were able to identify pretty precisely. The magic is actually how do you actually create the behavioral change? How do you inspire someone on how to apply it? And I'm going to give you an interesting example. So, tonight, what are you doing tonight at approximately 4 a.m?
Sleeping.
Okay. 4 a.m. So I was actually going to invite you to something. I don't know, and I was going to invite you to something. So, there's actually a workshop. It's 3 hours. And it is, how to negotiate with the Japanese. And it's going to run tonight from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. So I just wanted to see how you felt about attending the workshop tonight.
Hard pass.
Okay, hard pass. Okay. So let's say that you and I were flying to Tokyo tomorrow night, to negotiate a $50 million deal to acquire your business.
Less of a hard pass.
Yeah. So if we're going to, and so let's say you've only had 3 days planned for this trip. I invite you to this workshop, and we've got $50 million on the line and maybe the next 10 years of your life. I have a feeling you might think differently about the workshop.
Definitely.
So what's the difference?
Communication.
Okay.
Or the scenario. In this case, it's the scenario.
Right. So we would call that, I'm giving you an opportunity to learn that's going to have a way where you can apply it immediately in a meaningful way in your life. And so that is the secret behind how happy functions.
Yeah.
Is if I went to your company and I said to you next week, hey, we're going to have a 4-hour workshop on emotional intelligence. I'm not saying that people in your company don't care about emotional intelligence, mind you. But if we're going to do a 4-hour workshop on emotional intelligence, that is going to be a hard sell for your company. Your people are busy. They got a lot of stuff to do. Not everybody has an immediate way to apply it. Some people aren't managers. Some people don't care. The people that do care are busy. So I'm not saying there's no value in a 4-hour seminar, but I will tell you that if there's no way to immediately apply what you're learning, it's really hard to get buy-in. And so happy's based on 2 principles. One principle is application. I'm going to actually teach you emotional intelligence and communication and collaboration skills with tips on your actual real coworkers that are meaningful to you that you can use tomorrow. So because of that, if you were to actually look at our research on the meaningful change that we make in companies, it's very significant because we're actually giving you like meaningful things that you can apply. Like if you've got a chief administrative officer that's a woman that you've worked with for 5 years and occasionally you have friction with her, and I immediately can give you actionable tips on how to communicate more effectively with her right in the flow of work. That's something you can walk into a meeting and use tomorrow.
That's huge, James. It sounds like there's just in case scenarios and just in time, and this is the Japanese example is a just in time.
Yeah,
obviously webinar or whatever, but this is immediate, right? We can use this not just in case, but just in time and just in case, right? Because the conflict was a big one. One of the things that we really push here is for our leaders to have what I call tough conversations. And they're not only good for the leader and the company, but they're great for that employee, right? Because that person will not grow because of those small things that they do that keep them down. If we say nothing and we act passive aggressively and pass them up on opportunities or eventually have to let them go, who wins from that? Nobody. But if I understand how they think and they understand how we think and we can communicate better, even through conflict, I think that's a huge, huge window. I mean, what an opportunity. So that's where I really like about this platform. That's great.
What do you think? I'm curious. What have you seen in terms of the biggest resistance that like your team has had or in your leadership experience in terms of their own leadership gaps? Like, why do you think people struggle with developing their leadership or their management effectiveness?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think some of those things take time outside of the work. So, how we become good leaders, some of it is innate, right? It's just who we are and how we grew up and whatever our life scenarios were. Half of it is learned. So if I'm a guy that reads a book a week and my leaders are willing to read all kinds of different books, that takes time and effort. But if they can do it, they will become better leaders, right? But what does that mean? That means they have to spend time outside of work. So rather than listening to music, they have to listen to a book. Rather than playing golf, they have to read a book. And so I think that is probably the biggest issue is time and willingness to do more. I think that's one. Two, I think that they don't know where to start. Right. I have to bend and adjust to every single person's personality. Well, I'm the leader. Why don't they bend to my personality? Right. And so I think those are two common things I see often.
Yeah, I think that's
What do you
fair.
think?
I think that's fair. I think, everybody's experience is different because I like asking CEOs that question. It's part of the kind of fun part about Happy is you get to talk to a lot of senior leaders about their people. So you get to ask a lot of fun questions.
Nice.
I think that the type of business often dictates it.
Sure.
What type of business are you running? Are you running a business that has a lot of hybrid? What I'm hearing a lot now is hybrid work has changed leadership a lot for the CEOs that we work with and the CEOs we talk to and the leaders we talk to. And I'm not one of these people, like I'm a believer that there's a workplace for everybody. And so it kind of bothers me sometimes, like where there's these fierce debates about return to the office or, hybrid work or remote work's the only way to go, or people arguing in-person work. It's like, I feel like, different companies have different types of environments. So if you're a manufacturer, remote work might not even be an option. You're making things, you're building doors, you're building metal parts, you're CNC machining. If maybe a business like yours, could be fully remote or could be hybrid pretty easily, but it's tough. What we're hearing is leaders really struggle with learning how to adapt to hybrid environments or hybrid remote and in-person environments. And I think that for a younger leader or a new leader, when you could take your team out to Taco Tuesdays and have a margarita, I think you get a lot of feedback and you build a lot of connectivity, like connective tissue really naturally. And just there's a lot more time for just some social bonding, just some kind of off work social bonding. And I think is it's harder to be a leader today than it was 20 years ago because of that. And then the other thing is that let's not forget 20 or 30 years ago, I mean, the impact of the phone and social media, has taken, it used to be you met a lot of your friends at work. And now, you're able to create connectivity with your friends 24 hours a day through social. And so I think it's taken, some emphasis away from the workplace relationship. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think the tough part about that is people don't know how to work together as effectively as they did naturally.
Agreed.
So, we don't know how to work together. And then I think a lot of CEOs don't know what to do about that. I mean, I'll give you one quick example. I was talking to a leadership team that had about 1,500 employees, and we were talking through like their investments in their people. And one of the questions I usually ask is, virtually everybody says organizational culture is important. They've got a different word for it, but they could say my people are important, or my culture is important, or employee engagement's important. And then I go, okay, can you walk me through what those investments look like? Like, what are you doing? If your people are important outside of paying them and 401k or healthcare or whatever, like outside of that and the free tea, like talk to me about what you're doing. And what you get a lot is like, they're not doing a lot, even though they say they're doing a lot. And you start asking, well, why? And to your point, the response becomes, well, I don't know what to do. Like they don't, it takes a lot of work to do anything, right? Like, and then it's, so they don't even know what to do. So even leaders of companies that have 500, 600, 700 people don't know how they build that organizational culture. So we sort through that a lot of like, it's hard, if it's a priority to you, it's not just happy, right? There's a lot of other things that go into creating a good organizational culture.
Well, they have to be happy and productive as well, right? So I think it's easy to figure out the happy in a surface level way, right? I can just give them an incredible office with all kinds of flexibility. They can do whatever they want and they'll be happy. How productive they will be or grow in their careers, that's the question, right? So how do you combine that comfort, that productivity, and the happiness is, I think, the right formula. James, you asked me a great question. I'm going to ask you back. You've got a lot of data points about a company culture, happiness. So tell us, what can you teach? What advice do you have for leaders? And what's the data saying about real happiness, right? Like you said, I don't care about the espresso machine or we do all of those things, right? We do all the fun stuff, Taco Tuesday, and we've had massages here and yoga and all that wonderful stuff. But it doesn't matter at the end of the day. They've got to feel fulfilled. So what is the data saying that true happiness in a workplace looks like?
So it's complex. And so one of the things I like to do, and even though our company is called Happy, I like to kind of somehow dive into the word happiness because it means something different to different people. I like to define it do your people love their job? Do your people love working for your company? And then ultimately, are they productive? Because you could have somebody that loves their job and loves your company, but they're not productive. By the flip side, you can also have people that are productive, but that don't love their work and don't love the company. And I think you're looking for all three, because only when all three are in place do you have what I would call truly sustainable organizational performance. You've got to be highly motivated. Why are you highly motivated? I'm highly motivated because I love what I do. Okay, great. Why are you highly motivated? I'm highly motivated because I love this company. I love this organization. I love my team. So like those are non-negotiables, right? And then the second thing is, why am I productive? Well, I'm productive because number one, I love what I do. Number two, I love the organization and the team I work with. And number three, I have the skills and experiences necessary to excel, right? So like I'm productive because I have the skills and experience. I need to do the job. I've either been trained or I brought the experience in with me, and I have mission alignment and I love my job. And so one of the things that I encourage people to ask, and by the way, this has nothing to do with happy, and it's a pretty scary question. And you can ask this of your own people that work for your company. So Vitas, I'd say this is a scary one, but we're going to try it. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you love working for me? And If the answer is not a 5, what would we need to change to make it a 5?
That is scary, because some of the things you might hear are not possible. That's where the fear comes in. You don't always want to know the answer.
No, I did not say this was easy.
All right.
But when you ask a question like that, and I have a couple of them that are like that, but when you ask a question like that and you're willing to create a safe space, the answer becomes really beautiful, because the person might not really understand even how to answer it yet, but they need to think about it. would it take for me to make that a 5 out of 5? What would it take? How do you enjoy working for me? Rank me 1 to 5, with 5 being best. And if I'm not a 5, what do I need to do to become a 5? So the thing I like about asking that question is that it's asking you where are you at, but it's also saying, like, what can I do to make it a 5 for you? And you might say, I can't do that. And that's also valuable. So, you'd ask about data points, and maybe I kind of answered this as in a non-data oriented way, but I think the big thing the data would tell me is that most organizations, one of the things that you'll learn is employees want more coaching, they want more training, they want more feedback. And most companies simply do not have the time and do not put the resources into any of those 3 things. That's what the data really says.
James, how powerful would it be to flip that exact question, which is a brilliant question, and have the employees ask that of their managers and their boss? Because that's a wonderful opportunity. Again, it's scary, right? Because I might want to hear something that I don't want to hear. But I think it's a great opportunity, because then you're truly aligned, right?
Yeah.
If you find gaps, some of those gaps are fillable and some of them are not. And potentially they're getting in the way of true success for both sides. So why not get to it, right?
I'm a big believer in, we're in the middle of another business that I run, where we're in the middle of going through developing a performance management system. And one of the big things we're doing is the question you just asked, which is, how do you create a culture of transparency in the organization? And truly the kind of candor and open communication that would allow both a manager and an employee to be able to communicate honestly and openly. And I think there's like 2 parts of that equation, right? One of that is creating the trust between the manager and the employee. But the second thing is making it okay for us acknowledging that this person's not in the right seat or they're not in the right role. Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of fear behind that. Like, oh my gosh, like, am I going to lose my job? Right? There's some fear on the employee. And then I think for the manager, it's like, feels like a heavy thing to communicate with someone. But if you believe that people will give their best performance in their role that they love and that they find, true meaningful value in, that's something you've got to ask yourself as a owner, as a leader, as a manager. Like, how can you not have that conversation?
James, what's funny is although I value exit interviews, I think they're skewed in a way, right? So either people don't want to do them, they want to do them, and they want to prove a point and kind of nudge you a little bit for not giving them what you wanted, whether it's compensation or flexibility or whatever, or it's just they're playing nice so they can leave and have a good relationship, right? And so how powerful is it to have these conversations quarterly or even more often, so that you can potentially solve some of those problems, challenges, conflicts now, so that you don't do an exit interview,
Yeah. I'm a big believer in facilitating improved communication and collaboration. I'll kind of tell you it's a little joke, but I have never had a CEO or a leader or a manager tell me that improving communication, collaboration, and teamwork has not been worth it.
Agreed.
Like, that's never happened. So I'm 2 years into Happy and talking to hundreds of leaders, and nobody said, yeah, we invested a lot in improving communication and collaboration, and, that didn't really make any difference. Like, it always makes a difference.
Sure.
Investing in people always pays off. And I don't know how many times have you in your career said, man, I hired such an amazing person for this role and they were so impactful, but they were probably better than I needed.
Yeah, never.
Like, that doesn't happen. Like, you never say like, oh, I invested big in this role and I had someone amazing, but I didn't really need somebody that amazing. Like, that just never happens, right? So it's like every people investment is worthwhile. I very rarely see people investing in I know you're in the hiring bucket, right? It's like same thing with hiring, right? Like, the value of a great hire is, 10x, right?
Absolutely.
And then conversely, a bad hire can really like wreck an organization from the inside out.
Absolutely. James, one of the things we started doing, and I think we can get more consistent with it, but so we would have entrance interviews, right? Not a interview to decide whether we're going to hire you or not, because that's a show in a way, right? It's a performance. Everybody's on their best, kind of first date mode, or second date, or third date, or even fourth date. Still, you're not 100% yourself potentially. But when someone gets in the door, it's like a entrance interview is like, hey, what do you want to accomplish? How do you expect us to help? What are some of your challenges? So on and so forth. So we do that. Then we do stay interviews, right? And stay interviews could happen monthly, annually, not monthly, maybe every 6 months or so, or a year. And then of course the unfortunate exit interviews, which must happen too. So if you sandwich this in, combined with a great interview process,
right?
Like our whole thing to our clients is, our whole interview process is retention focus, and it's all about alignment. It's not necessarily just the skills. Sure, the technical skills are important, but you're going to figure that out with our help. Culture, sure, that's important, but how about alignment, right? So if we get those things right, and you have a good onboarding program, man, you're going to win. You're going to win in a big way. James, give us two things leaders should absolutely stop doing based on what you've seen.
Interrupting. I'm going to give you, I say that laughingly, but actually quite seriously. I think listening is an art that a leader, anything from a CEO to a new manager, has to learn. And it's a painful lesson. Like, listening is hard. Deep listening is really hard. There's nothing that I think I've learned that has impacted my ability to lead and communicate with people other than really learning deep listening. And I am an impatient person. So for me, listening, and I'm talking about deep listening, really listening to someone. And then the other thing is that reading. I believe that leaders read, and you can either make the mistake yourself, or you can learn through others' stories. But I'm just a really big believer. I know these are principles, listening and reading, but huge. I tell our young managers and leaders, here's 5 great books, and you're going to learn stories in these books about other leaders and the experiences that they went through. And, I'm a believer that you can learn through others. You can't learn everything. I mean, you're going to go through your own pain, your own trial by fire.
Yeah.
But
James, in a world of AI, I think the only thing left for us to really do in a few years is to our ability to connect on a deep level with human beings, right? That's the only skill set that's left for us to be valuable. Otherwise, most of the things we do will be replaced by AI, frankly, right? So get ready for it. James, it's been a pleasure. How do people find you? How do they find Happy Companies? I mean, you and I already talked about us implementing this in 2025. How do people find you?
Yeah, so happycompanies.com if you want to learn a little bit more about the product. And then you can go to happyprofile.com to get your own profile. So if you want to just go in and get your own happy profile, you can go to happyprofile.com, and you can do it just as an individual. It's totally free, and it'll send you free coaching twice a week. It doesn't cost anything. So we like to we give that away to get people self-develop, more self-aware. And then you can look me up on LinkedIn, James Lawrence, if you want. I post every day almost. And I give good advice and bad advice. So you get both for the cost of a free cup of coffee.
Perfect. James, been a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving us so much knowledge. And I'm very excited about the platform and potentially what it could do in my organization and all the companies I work with and all that.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Sure, brother. Keep making companies happy. We all need happy companies make happy people, I guess, and vice versa.
Oh, we will.
See you, brother. And that brings us to the end of another great episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. I want to thank you for joining us and hope you took away some valuable insights to apply in your professional journey. Don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss out on the next great conversation. I promise it'll be good. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps others discover the podcast. Better leaders mean better working environments. Better working environments leads to happier people. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm Avita Santoplian, and this has been the Tech Leaders Playbook. Keep leading, keep learning, keep giving, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, stay inspired, my friends.